Three insane females chained to the floor or bed in the poorhouse of one of the wealthiest counties, never taken out to walk, ride, or exercise. The inmates' quarters are less ventilated and more filthy than an ordinary stable, one woman being chained up in the barn because she was noisy. Dr. Abram Van Nordstrom, 1864. The Mendota Mental Health Institute, located in Madison, Wisconsin, is situated on the northeast shores of Lake Mendota. Located next to the Governor's Island on one side of a cape, the hospital grounds can be seen from almost any shoreline. When at the terrace at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, due north across the lake, many of the institution's buildings are visible to the naked eye. It is safe to say that the Mendota Mental Health Institute is much different than it was when it first opened as the Wisconsin State Hospital for the Insane in 1860. However, this fact does not excuse its secret, disturbing, and sometimes horrific past. After Wisconsin was granted statehood in 1848, the state became focused on helping and improving the lives of its residents. Establishing facilities and programs such as an asylum were a major priority. On May 6, 1857, the law that allowed for the erection of Wisconsin's first asylum was approved and passed legislation. The Wisconsin State Hospital for the Insane was officially born. The approved building style was the Kirkbride Plan. Named after Dr. Thomas Kirkbride, the construction was based on the therapeutic healing method known as moral treatment. The style was to ultimately create a space to facilitate the return to sanity. Located in a natural environment away from pollutants and large populations, his buildings are characterized by a unique batwing floor plan, lavish Victorian-era architecture, and palace-like expansive grounds.
The Four Lakes area is home to more than 1,200 individual mounds and around 160 groups and locations. Moreover, Lake Mendota was one of the most heavily modified of the Four Lakes by the native Ho-Chunk peoples, with around 370 individual mounds that date back to 700 to 1000 AD. Mendota Mental Health Institute is located on the northern side of Lake Mendota, near the Governor's Island, and contains several effigy mounds. There is a bear, an eagle, and a four-legged deer on the property. The animal-shaped mound represents the three natural realms, sky, earth, and water. The eagle effigy mound, with a wingspan of over 600 feet, has become the emblem of the hospital. Large birds and eagles represent great importance to the Ho-Chunk people, so the land that Mendota Mental Health Institute is on was most likely the settlement of prestigious civil chiefs, or a main settlement of the natives. Small conical mounds are thought to represent the burial of prominent people since their shape suggests an association with the sky and upper world. These mounds can still be seen today.
Many notable people have stayed at the Mendota Mental Health Institute over the years, including Ed Gein. Arrested in 1957 from his home in Plainfield, Wisconsin, just an hour and a half from Madison, Gein inspired the creation of several fictional serial killers, including Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. Gein was thought to suffer from an Oedipus complex, which accounted for two murdered women who resembled his mother, and the robbing of graves of over 12 women. He would take their bodies back to his farmhouse and mutilate them. He would then fashion various outfits, masks, and upholstered furniture out of their skin. Human organs were found in the freezer, and bowls made from skulls, from which he would eat the hearts and other organs of his victims. Gein was sentenced to life in prison, which he spent at mental institutes. He was transferred to the Mendota Mental Health Institute in 1978. Quote, he immediately became the hospital's resident celebrity. New employees could hardly wait to get their first glimpse of the notorious Edward Gein. and then they could hardly believe that he was the monster who haunted their childhood dreams. End quote. He died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute in 1984 from respiratory and heart failure due to cancer.
During the early years of asylums, families would often just commit family members who they didn't want to care for anymore, regardless of their mental state. At the time, there were no tests or evaluations given to patients that were admitted, and they could then just live and work on the grounds until they died. The lack of regulations and limits for patients could explain the rise in number of patients over the years as the hospital became more well known. A report from the hospital displayed the average number of patients. It increased from 7 in 1860 to 362 in 1870. This overcrowdedness and lack of regulation opened the doors for neglect, abuse, and horrific treatment. Hydrotherapy is a form of treatment in which water is used to help relieve pain and treat illness. Inside the Wisconsin Hospital for the Insane, tubs for this type of treatment were installed. Even though these baths were to be therapeutic, the doctors at this hospital had interpreted the use in a very different way. Anna Wilson, an attendant at the hospital in 1868, recounted her experience with hydrotherapy.
I have assisted to give 2 cold baths. She had a spite towards Miss Herbert. She struck Miss Herbert as she was passing around the medicine and gave her a bad bruise. She was put into a bath right away. We fill the tub about half full of cold water, then tie the patient's hands and feet, the hands behind them. Then we hold them underwater just as long as we can hold our breath. We raise up their heads and let them breathe. In the case of Miss Winthrop, we put her head under 3 times. The other case was Miss Jansen. They had to take her by force. She was undressed and put in the bath. I could not tell you how many times she was dunked under. Not over 4, I think.
Unfortunately, other forms of abuse were used, such as hitting and choking. In Thomas Doherty's book, The Best Specimen of a Tyrant, he uncovers the truth of many brutal events in the earlier years of Mendota Health Institute. Under the watch of Superintendent Dr. Abraham von Nordstrand, patients were slapped, kicked, hit, kneed, and choked. The superintendent himself would box their ears, pull their hair, and hit them until their face was black and blue. One attendant admitted, "We used to lock patients in dark rooms, put straitjackets on them, strap them to seats, and use the bed strap to strap them to their beds." Neglect was also common, where sick or injured patients would not be checked on or cared for weeks on end. Death rates were high. In the first 2 years, nearly 1 of every 7 patients died. Unfortunately, many of these incidences went unreported and were hidden from the public to protect the reputation of the young hospital.
Eugenics is defined as the science of improving a human population by a controlled breeding to increase the occurrence of desirable heritable characteristics. The movement began in the 1890s when progressive educators, charity, and correction officials began looking for ways to solve the economic crisis they were facing. A eugenist of the most extreme kind was Dr. Frank Drake of the Wisconsin State Hospital for the Insane. Drake portrayed degeneracy as a cancerous growth, eating away at the vitals of the body politic. Drake criticized the efforts of reformers to ameliorate the environment, since improved hygienic and social conditions only enhance the survival of unfit stocks, thus checking the natural purification of the state. Drake pronounced sterilization as the simplest, most humane, and most economic means of preventing the propagation of degeneracy. The first official act of population control was in 1907, when Wisconsin made it illegal for epileptic, feeble-minded, and insane people to marry. It declared it was a misdemeanor for any of these groups to have sexual intercourse. It was the first state to pass such a law. Finally, on July 30th, 1913, Governor Francis McGovern of Wisconsin enacted Chapter 693, a statute empowering the state to sterilize inmates of both mental and penal institutions and to require the presentation of a medical certificate when applying for a marriage license. Wisconsin was the 12th state to pass a sterilization law in the United States. Groups specifically identified by the 1913 sterilization law are criminals, insane, feeble-minded, and epileptics. Although these were specifically enumerated, those who were most likely to be sterilized were feeble-minded people, mostly women, who were deemed to be sexually promiscuous. Involuntary sterilization remained legal until July 1978, when Chapter 428 of the Laws of 1977 outlawed the procedure.
Off with your head, dance till you're dead. Heads will roll, heads will roll, heads will roll on the floor. Bladder roll.